Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Red Room Stories. I know many of you tune into these tales to help you drift off to sleep. So, before we settle in, I'd love for each of you to leave a comment sharing where in the world you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. The dusk settled over the woods, its shadows deepening as Theo ventured through the tangled undergrowth. His flashlight wavered in his hand, its beam slicing through the gloom, searching for his niece Lila, who'd vanished after a frantic call about children in the trees. Her voice had trembled, the line cutting off mid-sob, leaving only silence in its wake. The air was damp, thick with pine and a faint, sour rot, urging him deeper into the forest. He gripped Lila's hairpin, found snagged on a branch, its metal warm against his palm, pulling him onward. A giggle rippled through the leaves, high and unsteady, trembling the earth beneath Theo's boots. He paused, sweeping the light across the woods, its glow catching on gnarled trunks and a clearing where the trees parted unnaturally. The giggle pulsed, rhythmic and eerie, drawing him toward the open space where shadows clung thick and still. He called Lila's name, his voice muffled by the foliage, answered only by a faint, wet rustle from the clearing's heart. His heart thudded, but he pressed closer, the hairpin glinting in his grasp. The clearing revealed a circle of stones, smooth and pale, streaked with a dark, oily sheen that shimmered in the flashlight's beam. Theo's light trembled as he stepped inside, spotting Lila's scarf tangled in the grass, its fabric soaked with that same sheen. The giggle deepened, thrumming through his legs, and he approached the center, where a hollow yawned wide, its edges jagged and glistening. He aimed the beam downward, revealing a pit that plunged into shadow, its walls slick with a strange film. A scrape rose from below, slow and deliberate, and his stomach twisted. A shape darted beyond the clearing, swift and small, vanishing as Theo swung the light. The rustle came again, louder, joined by a whisper that slithered through the air, alien against the wood's hush. He shouted for Lila, his voice breaking, and the whisper turned into Gigglesoft, overlapping voices rising from the hollow. He stepped back, clutching the scarf, his boots sinking into the soft earth. The giggles swelled, blending with the first, a chorus pressing against his ears. He peered into the hollow, the light catching on a ledge below, littered with debris, bones, cloth, toysol coated in that oily sheen. Theo's breath fogged as he spotted Lila's doll, its eyes cracked, nestled among the remains. The giggles sharpened, and a hand lunged from the dark, small and clawing, scraping the ledge before retreating. He stumbled back, the flashlight slipping, its beams spinning across the clearing, the giggle shaking the stones around him. Footsteps pattered behind him, light and uneven, stirring the leaves with each quick stride. Theo turned, the light trembling, glimpsing a figure's maul, its limbs too thin, its head tilted long before it melted into the dusk. The footsteps circled, closing in, and he bolted toward the hollow, clutching the doll, the giggles rising into a scream that pierced the night. Shapes loomed along the clearing's edge, their silhouettes swaying, too many to count, their presence a weight on the air. The hollow beckoned, and Theo slid down its slope, the walls tight, the air thick with damp and decay. His light flickered, illuminating gashes, scratched into the stone frantic, overlapping, stretching deeper as he descended. The scream echoed, joined by a dragging scrape that sent chills up his spine. He landed in a chamber, its ceiling low, its floor littered with broken toys that shimmered under the beam. Lila's coat lay in the center, soaked in sheen, surrounded by bones still wet with marrow. A figure crouched in the shadows, its form cloaked in tatters, its head bowed over a pile of debris. Theo's light shook as he approached, recognizing Lila's shoes, but the figure turned, revealing a face that wasn't hers pale, eyeless, its mouth gaping in a childlike grin. It lunged, and he swung the flashlight, cracking it against its skull, the bulb shattering, plunging the chamber into darkness. The scream surged, shapes shifting in the black, their claws scraping stone as they closed in. He ran, hands groping for the hollow. The creatures pursued, their scrapes and giggles filling the air, their small bodies pressing through the narrow passage. Theo clawed upward, the stone cutting his palms, the coat slipping as he reached the surface. He burst into the clearing, the woods alive with movement figures swaying, their heads cocked, the scream a deafening roar. The ground quaked, the hollow widening, swallowing the stones as he fled, the gloom blurring around him. He tripped, tumbling into a ditch, the doll glinting beside him in the dirt. Theo crawled free, the woods endless under the shadowed sky, the giggle fading, the figures gone. His flashlight lay broken, the doll clutched tight, its plastic warm against his skin. A wanderer named Ruth found him on a muddy trail, soaked and muttering, the sheen still clinging to his hands. He told his story at her camp, his words spilling out about Lila and the children, met with a furrowed brow as she offered tea he didn't drink. Ruth glanced outside, the clearing's faint outline in the distance, and stayed silent, her hands steady but pale. The next day, Theo led Ruth and a tracker, Amos, to the clearing, but the hollow had vanished, the ground smooth, the bones and coat nowhere in sight. Amos sighed, suggesting exhaustion or a trick of the dark, but his eyes lingered on the doll, its sheen faintly pulsing in the light. Theo returned home, the apartment cold, Lila's scarf inexplicably on the counter, dry but heavy. Sleep evaded him, the giggles echoing in his ears, the sheen's chill lingering on his skin. Then he found a note in Ruth's handwriting. "They took me too" slipped under his door. One night the lights dimmed and the giggles surged, rattling the walls. Theo grabbed a knife, the doll glowing faintly, its sheen thrumming as shadows stretched across the room. The screams seeped through the floor, joined by patters against the windows, the ceiling, the door. He barricaded himself in, the knife raised, but the shadows thickened, small hands pressing through the walls, pale and dripping. The windows cracked, leaves swirling inward, and the lights died, the giggles drowning his cries. Morning broke, the apartment empty, the knife on the floor, the doll and note gone. The door stood locked, the windows intact despite the cracks. Theo vanished. A neighbor, old Mr. Vance, heard screams in the night, saw shapes slink toward the woods, but the trackers found no tracks on Ruth, standing at the clearing, staring into the hollow with a haunted gaze. She muttered about Amos, her lost son, hinting the eyeless child was him, one of the hollow children who'd claimed them all. The woods stretched on, their shadows long and still, whispering tales of lost souls and giggling horrors. Theo's name joined Lila's in the stories, carried on the wind, a warning etched into the dusk's shroud. Ruth lingered at the hollow, her own laughter mingling with theirs, drawn by the children she'd once escaped, her fate sealed as the stones gleamed anew. The night shrouded the old house in darkness, its walls groaning as Clara crept through the dusty corridors. Her flashlight wavered in her hand, its beam cutting through the gloom, searching for her cousin Elias, who'd vanished after a frantic call about a red room. His voice had quaked, the line dropping mid-plea, leaving only silence in its wake. The air was stale, thick with mildew and a faint metallic tang, urging her deeper into the ruin. She gripped Elias's watch, found ticking faintly on a stair, its hands frozen at midnight, pulling her onward. A pulse thrummed through the floor, low and steady, trembling the boards beneath Clara's boots. She paused, sweeping the light across the hallway, its glow catching on peeling wallpaper and a door painted a deep, unnatural red. The pulse beat, rhythmic and deep, drawing her toward the door where shadows clung thick and still. She called Elias's name, her voice swallowed by the house, answered only by a faint, wet scrape from beyond. Her heart raced, but she pressed closer, the watch warm in her grasp. The red door loomed heavy, its surface streaked with a dark, oily sheen that shimmered in the flashlight's beam. Clara's light trembled as she pushed it open, spotting Elias's scarf tangled in a hinge, its fabric soaked with that same sheen. The pulse deepened, vibrating through her legs, and she stepped inside, the beam revealing a room bathed in crimson walls, Floor, ceiling gall, glistening wetly. A rustle rose from the shadows, slow and deliberate, and her stomach twisted, dread anchoring her steps. A shape darted beyond the room, swift and hunched, vanishing as Clara swung the light. The scrape came again, louder, joined by a hiss that slithered through the air, alien against the house's hush. She shouted for Elias, her voice faltering, and the hiss turned into murmur soft, overlapping voices rising from the walls. She stepped back, clutching the scarf, her boots scuffing the slick floor. The murmurs swelled, blending with the pulse, a chorus pressing against her ears. She scanned the room, the light catching on a corner littered with debris bones, cloth, trinkets all coated in that oily sheen. Clara's breath fogged as she spotted Elias's ring, its band bent, pressed against the wall as if fused. The murmurs sharpened, and a hand lunged from the crimson surface, pale and clawing, scraping the wall before retreating. She stumbled back, the flashlight slipping, its beam spinning across the room, the pulse shaking the floor around her. Footsteps shuffled behind her, heavy and uneven, stirring the dust with each deliberate stride. Clara turned, the light trembling, glimpsing a figure tall, its limbs too long, its head tilted wrong before it melted into the shadows. The footsteps circled, closing in, and she bolted toward a hatch in the floor, clutching the ring, the murmurs rising into a wail that pierced the night. Shapes loomed along the room's edges, their silhouettes swaying, too many to count, their presence a weight on the air. The hatch creaked open, and Clara descended its ladder, the walls tight, the air thick with damp and rot. Her light flickered, illuminating gashes scratched into the wood frantic, overlapping, stretching deeper as she went. The wail echoed, joined by a dragging scrape that sent chills up her spine. She landed in a cellar, its ceiling low, its walls pulsing red under the beam. Elias's coat lay in the center, soaked in sheen, surrounded by bones still wet with marrow. A figure crouched in the shadows, its form cloaked in tatters, its head bowed over a pile of debris. Clara's light shook as she approached, recognizing Elias's boots, but the figure turned, revealing a face that wasn't his pale, eyeless, its mouth gaping in a silent grin. It lunged, and she swung the flashlight, cracking it against its skull, the bulb shattering, plunging the cellar into darkness. The wails surged, shapes shifting in the black, their claws scraping wood as they closed in. She ran, hands groping for the ladder. The creatures pursued, their scrapes and drags filling the air, their bodies pressing through the narrow space. Clara clawed upward, the wood splintering her palms, the coat slipping as she reached the red room. She burst from the hatch, the house alive with moving figures swaying, their heads cocked, the wail a deafening roar. The walls trembled, the hatch widening, swallowing the floor as she fled, the gloom blurring around her. She tripped, tumbling into the hall, the ring glinting beside her in the dust. Clara crawled free, the house endless under the shadowed sky, the pulse fading, the figures gone. Her flashlight lay broken, the ring clutched tight, its metal warm against her skin. A wanderer named Ruth found her on the porch, soaked and muttering, the sheen still clinging to her hands. She told her story at Ruth's truck, her words spilling out about Elias in the red room, met with a furrowed brow as Ruth offered tea she didn't drink. Ruth glanced at the house, its faint outline in the distance, and stayed silent, her hands steady but pale. The next day, Clara led Ruth and a tracker, Amos, to the house, but the red room had shifted its walls bare, the hatch gone, the bones and coat nowhere in sight. Amos sighed, suggesting exhaustion or a trick of the dark, but his eyes lingered on the ring, its sheen faintly pulsing in the light. Clara returned home, the apartment cold, Elias's scarf inexplicably on the counter, dry but heavy. Sleep evaded her, the pulse echoing in her ears, the sheen's chill lingering on her skin. Then she found a note in Ruth's handwriting. I painted it, slipped under her door. One night, the lights dimmed, and the pulse surged, rattling the walls. Clara grabbed a knife, the ring glowing faintly, its sheen thrumming as shadows stretched across the room. The wail seeped through the floor, joined by thuds against the windows, the ceiling, the door. She barricaded herself in, the knife raised, but the shadows thickened, hands pressing through the walls, pale and dripping. The windows cracked, dust swirling inward, and the lights died, the pulse drowning her cries. Morning broke, the apartment empty, the knife on the floor, the ring and note gone. The door stood locked, the windows intact despite the cracks. Clara vanished. A neighbor, old Mr. Finch, heard wails in the night, saw shapes slink toward the house, but the trackers found no tracks only Ruth, standing in the red room, staring at the walls with a haunted gaze. She muttered about Amos, her lost brother, hinting the eyeless figure was him, trapped by the secret she'd sealed in the paint. The house stretched on, its shadows long and still, whispering tales of lost souls and crimson horrors. Clara's name joined Elias's in the stories, carried on the wind, a warning etched into the night shroud. Ruth lingered in the red room, her hands tracing the walls she'd made, drawn by the pulse she'd unleashed, her fate entwined with the secret as the sheen bled anew. The night cloaks the forest in shadow as Elias pushes through the tangled undergrowth, his flashlight wavering in his grip. Its beam slices through the darkness, searching for his sister Nora, who vanished after a panicked call about teeth chattering in the woods. Her voice shook with terror, the line cutting off mid-cry, leaving only silence behind. The air hangs heavy with damp pine and a faint sour rot, urging him deeper into the trees. He clutches Nora's necklace, found dangling from a branch, its chain warm against his palm, drawing him onward. A clatter echoes through the trunks, sharp and unsteady, trembling the earth beneath Elias's boots. He stops, sweeping the light across the forest, its glow catching on gnarled roots and a clearing where the trees bend inward. The clatter pulses, rhythmic and eerie, pulling him toward the open space where shadows cling thick and still. He calls Nora's name, his voice muffled by the foliage, answered only by a faint, wet rustle from the clearing's heart. His heart pounds, but he presses forward, the necklace glinting in his grasp. The clearing reveals a pit, its edges jagged, its depths streaked with a dark, oily sheen that glimmers in the flashlight's beam. Elias's light shakes as he steps closer, spotting Nora's scarf, tangled in the dirt, its fabric soaked with that same sheen. The clatter deepens, thrumming through his legs, and he peers into the pit, the beam revealing a shaft that plunges into shadow, its walls slick with a strange film. A scrape rises from below, slow and deliberate, and his stomach twists, dread rooting him in place. A shape darts beyond the clearing, swift and low, vanishing as Elias swings the light. The rustle grows louder, joined by a hiss that slithers through the air, alien against the forest's hush. He shouts for Nora, his voice cracking, and the hiss turns into chattering sharp, overlapping teeth rising from the pit. He steps back, clutching the scarf, his boots sinking into the soft earth. The chattering swells, blending with the clatter, a chorus pressing against his ears. He leans over the pit, the light catching on a ledge below, littered with debris, bones, cloth, trinkets all coated in that oily sheen. Elias's breath fogs as he spots Nora's ring. Its band bent, nestled among the remains. The chattering sharpens, and a hand lunges from the dark, pale and clawing, scraping the ledge before retreating. He stumbles back, the flashlight slipping, its beam spinning across the clearing, the clatter shaking the ground around him. Footsteps shuffle behind him, heavy and uneven, stirring the leaves with each deliberate stride. Elias turns, the light trembling, glimpsing a figure tall, its limbs too long, its head tilted wrong before it melts into the gloom. The footsteps circle, closing in, and he bolts toward the pit, clutching the ring, the chattering rising into a scream that pierces the night. Shapes loom along the clearing's edge, their silhouettes swaying, too many to count, their presence a weight on the air. The pit swallows him as he slides down its slope, the walls tight, the air thick with damp and decay. His light flickers, illuminating gashes scratched into the stone frantic, overlapping, stretching deeper as he descends. The scream echoes, joined by a dragging scrape that sends chills up his spine. He lands in a chamber, its ceiling low, its floor slick with puddles that shimmer under the beam. Nora's coat lies in the center, soaked in sheen, surrounded by bones still wet with marrow. A figure crouches in the shadows, its form cloaked in tatters, its head bowed over a pile of debris. Elias's light shakes as he approaches, recognizing Nora's boots, but the figure turns, revealing a face that isn't hers pale, eyeless, its mouth gaping with jagged teeth. It lunges, and he swings the flashlight, cracking it against its skull, the bulb shattering, plunging the chamber into darkness. The scream surges, shapes shifting in the black, their claws scraping stone as they close in. He runs, hands groping for the pit. The creatures pursue, their scrapes and chattering filling the air, their bodies pressing through the narrow passage. Elias claws upward, the stone cutting his palms, the coat slipping as he reaches the surface. He bursts into the clearing, the forest alive with movement figures swaying, their heads cocked, the scream a deafening roar. The ground quakes, the pit widening, swallowing the edges as he flees, the dark blurring around him. He trips, tumbling into a ditch, the ring glinting beside him in the dirt. Elias crawls free, the forest endless under the shadowed sky, the clatter fading, the figures gone. His flashlight lies broken, the ring clutched tight, its metal warm against his skin. A wanderer named Ruth finds him on a muddy trail, soaked and muttering, the sheen still clinging to his hands. He tells his story at her camp, words spilling out about Nora and the teeth, met with a furrowed brow as she offers tea he doesn't drink. Ruth glances outside, the clearing's faint outline in the distance, and stays silent, her hands steady but pale. The next day, Elias leads Ruth and a tracker, Jonah, to the clearing, but the pit has vanished, the ground smooth, the bones and coat nowhere in sight. Jonah sighs, suggesting exhaustion or a trick of the dark, but his eyes linger on the ring, its sheen faintly pulsing in the light. Elias returns home, the apartment cold, Nora's scarf inexplicably on the counter, dry but heavy. Sleep evades him, the chattering echoing in his ears, the sheen's chill lingering on his skin. Then he finds a note in Ruth's handwriting. "They bit me too," slipped under his door. The lights dim one night, and the clatter surges, rattling the walls. Elias grabs a knife, the ring glowing faintly, its sheen thrumming as shadows stretch across the room. The scream seeps through the floor, joined by thuds against the windows, the ceiling, the door. He barricades himself in, the knife raised, but the shadows thicken, hands pressing through the walls, pale and dripping. The windows crack, leave swirling inward, and the lights die, the chattering drowning his cries. Morning breaks, the apartment empty, the knife on the floor, the ring and note gone. The door stands locked, the windows intact despite the cracks. Elias vanished. A neighbor, old Mrs. Pike, hears screams in the night, sees shapes slink toward the forest, but the trackers find no tracks only Ruth, standing at the clearing, staring into the dark with a haunted gaze. She mutters about Jonah, her lost husband, hinting the toothed figure was him, bitten by the darkness that now claims them all. The forest stretches on, its shadows long and still, whispering tales of lost souls and gnashing horrors. Elias's name joins Nora's in the stories, carried on the wind, a warning etched into the night shroud. Ruth lingers at the pit's edge, her own teeth chattering in the silence, drawn by the darkness she once fled, her fate sealed as the shadows bite anew.